Today, my goal is to share with you grant writing finally made easy, a portion of that workshop that I do at some of the local colleges. And this is getting your grant writing team ready to write grants, or getting your grant writing team ready for grant writing. We tried this earlier, did the whole show, thought we were on, and then discovered that we were not on. So hopefully this one is actually on this time. So we're going to get right into it as if we had not done it before, getting your team ready to write grants. Earlier, I shared that I have been writing grants for about 20 years. You can't write grants alone. You can only write grants with the team. So when my grants are successful, it's because I have worked with the team that has the information that I need. And what I can say I'm a good person at is gleaning that information from those individuals who has the information, and then delivering that information to the funder who has a desire to see something get done, and maybe they don't have the expertise, the wherewithal to do it, but this is something that they know they want done. So I pull that information together in a believable format for them using the documents that they put out, which is sometimes called an RFP, or request for proposal. And when we put all that information together, it develops a great grant, and sometimes a great fundable grant, to the tune of anywhere from 10,000 to 20,000 to 2.6 million to even 560,000, even 35 million. It just depends on what is going on and how much funds are available. So yes, there are grant funds out there, but those funds are out there for you to do what the funder wants done. So here's the secret to grant writing, and I've almost let the cat out of the bag. Grant writers give funds to you for you to do what they want done. This money is not for you to do what you want to do, it is what they want done. So the only reason any foundation, corporation, or government agency is going to give you money, regardless of your credit, regardless of your background, is because they believe that you will carry out one of their mission. You were able to put in that grant. You were able to make sure that grant was so believable that they could believe that you are going to carry out one of their missions, whether it's a government agency, corporation, or foundation. In order to get them to believe what you're doing, you want to make sure that you have the definitions down pat. One of the definitions that's not on this page, that for those of you who are able to see the page, is in-kind donations. In-kind donations is extremely important, because in-kind donations is money or volunteer hours or whatever it is that you're getting that is not cash. It's anything other than cash. So you want to make sure that you know not only that word, but a lot of other vocabulary words that goes along with grant writing. As a teacher in a business education classroom, I would always encourage my students, whether they were in personal finance, or whether they were in desktop publishing, or whether they were in marketing or accounting, whatever class they were in, I would always encourage them to get the vocabulary for that subject. If you get the vocabulary for the subject, or you get the vocabulary for the new job or the new business that you're starting, then you basically mastered that business. Grant writing is no different. You're wanting to get your team ready for grant writing. Probably the place to start with that team is to make sure that they understand the vocabulary that goes along with grant writing. Sometimes we want a short step and not do some of the more important things that has to do with grant writing. Well, learning the vocabulary is extremely important. So some of the vocabulary that I put in the class is the different types of grants, like seed money grants or startup grants. That's for those organizations that are just starting. Your planning grants for those organizations that are 3 years old. Equipment and facilities grants for those organizations that are going after $5,000 items or more. Sometimes they are called capital grants, facilities grants, as I said earlier. Endowment grants, management and technical assistance grants, and program related investments, which is actually a loan. If you're not sure what those are, you want to make sure that you are learning the definitions of the different types of grants that might be available for your organization. Also, another area that you want to study is grant priorities. What are the grant priorities? If you are working with a grant team, that team needs to know that whatever it is that you're trying to fund, there's somebody out there wanting to fund it. Now, in most cases, there is somebody out there wanting to fund a lot of different types of things, and they have a whole lot of different reasons for wanting to fund certain things. Sometimes people have experienced certain things in their lives, and they don't want to see anyone else go through what they went through, or they want to help see somebody else's life better, or they heard a story that touched their heart. So now they're trying to help people. Whatever the case, most people have some experience that they have had that they want to work on, or they want to fix. And that's how you find a win-win situation. When you have a situation that you want to work with, the funder wants to work with that situation, and then you have some people out there who need help in that area, whether it's domestic violence, whether it's hunger, whether it's food insecurity or hunger, whatever you want to call it. There's all different types of areas that people may want to work in. So those would be called the grant priority. And there are grant priorities and there are spending categories, especially when you're talking about in the federal government and in the government type areas. So you want to know what those priorities are and what those spending categories are and where that money is. If you listen to the news, then sometimes the news can kind of help you know where those governmental priorities are. Those governmental priorities are listed on certain websites, and for those of you who are able to see my screen, I have mandatory spending and government grants. There are different types of websites that will have lots of information on there. And you have to know where those websites are, because with mandatory spending, there are some grants that the government has to give away every year, and that is like Medicare, Social Security. Those are mandatory spending. But then there's discretionary spending in areas to where they don't have to give as much away, as in the parks area. And I used to see a lot of grants for fishing, and there still are. If you are a fishing person, you like to fish, and oh my goodness, my phone is not wanting to stand up right now. But if you are a person that likes to fish and hunt, there are grants out there for you to teach other people to do what you love to do. So you might want to consider that. There are categorical grants, grants for providing the funding specific programs that include a list of requirements. There are block grants, and those grants are for a specific block radius in cities. Or it may be a certain rural area. Those are block grants. And in Kansas City, I think we have the economic development zones, and in all across the country, I think there are some economic development zones, and you'll have to look to see if your city or your state has the economic opportunity zones. There are project grants, and those project grants are to do certain things, and that might be where you're talking about the domestic violence, or you're wanting to do something with foster care. So there are sometimes project grants out there. There are formula grants to where if 80% of your children receive free and reduced lunch, then 100% would get free lunch. I know that's one we've had. I hear that President Trump is talking about rescinding that, but I know that's one that many of the schools have benefited from. Then you have the matching grants, where the federal government or some other agency will give you 20% of the funds or 80% of the funds, and you have to come up with the other 20, or they'll give you 50% of the funds and you have to come up with the other 50. So that's the different types of grants. There are others. So you want to make sure that you, as far as this slide before, learn the definitions, and you also want to learn the spending priorities if you want to be a great grant writing team. Great grant writing teams know that their organization is ready to write grants. It never ceases to amaze me how many people come to me thinking that they are ready to write grants, but they don't have their 501c3, they don't have their Well, first of all, they don't have their incorporation, they don't have their 501c3, they don't have their collaborative team members, they don't have their grant writing team, they have not done anything in the community. If you are starting from scratch, it's harder for people to trust you because they don't know whether you're going to do anything or not. So sometimes you have to start in order for people to believe that you're actually going to do something. So you want to make sure you have your licenses and permits. You want to make sure that you're in good standings with your state, that you have the 501c3 or a partner with one. That's if you want them to have the money, because the fiscal agent is the one who's going to get the money. You want to have that EIN number, which is your employee identification number, your DUNS number. You want to make sure that you get registered to apply for grants. You want to also know that you have your grant writing team, including your collaboratives. Now, you may have your employees that's going to help you. You know they have to help you because you pay them their paycheck. But the ones that I'm talking about is that collaborative partnerships, those outside agencies that's going to help you. And I'm going to move my picture up some if I can. Because I want to be sure that you are able to see this down here. You want to know who your board is. And by that board, oh, wait a minute, I think we skipped quite a bit. Okay, now we go back. Now we're back to where we need to be. You want at least 5 different community partnerships: nonprofit, a for-profit, number 3, a government agency, and that's a government or community agency, a school, a faith-based agency. And when I say a, there could be several, because you may be one nonprofit, but you're not the only one. So you want to have another one. You may be the for-profit and you want another nonprofit, because yes, for-profits can get grants too, but a lot of times they do have to be in partnership with a nonprofit. So nonprofits, for-profit, government agency, school, and a faith-based program are the 5 different types of collaborative partnerships that I encourage you to have in your arsenal if you are going to go after grants. You may not need them all for every grant, but you're probably going to need them for some of the grants. When you're organizing your grant writing team, you want to make sure that you have your board, your executive board. This is the board that makes decisions for the organization. Your advisory board doesn't make decisions for the organization. They help the organization to raise funds. But your executive board should help the organization to raise funds, and it should help to make decisions for the organization. So for both of those boards, you want to know who your potential members are, what are their contributions, what is their contact information, so that when you need to get in touch with them, you can. Those are some of the things that you need. Now, as far as that advisory board, you want to make sure that that advisory board member has the 3 W's, which I've talked about before: work, wealth, or wisdom. You want, and it'd be nice if they had all 3, but you at least want them to have one of those, but maybe, really nice for them to have all 3. The next area is making sure that you're setting your collaborative organizational chart up, your collaborative and organizational chart up, so that you know where your organization members are. You may be the executive director, but who's going to be your project director? Who's going to be the project coordinator and the volunteer coordinator? And I know you're probably laughing, saying, I'm everything right now. And I understand that, because as a nonprofit, when you first start, you are everything. I remember when I first started my business, even I was everything, and we had, our family was everything rather, and we had everything that we owned at the business: the brooms, the mops, everything was there at the business. People would come to our house and say, where are your business where are your pots and pans at the business? Everything was at the business, because it was a child care center. So we moved a lot of stuff to the child care center, and we had to replenish as times got better. But when you're starting a new business or nonprofit, you may be the only one in the beginning, but as time goes, hopefully you will be able to grow and you will be able to add other people. I do want to tell you some of the things that you need to get from these people who are going to be a part of your organization. You need to know the things that you need to do, who's going to be responsible, the due date, and the timeline. You also need to have job descriptions for those people, and you need to have an organizational chart. You do that organizational chart as early as possible, because one thing you want to do, and I've said this before, you don't want to bring people into your mess. You want people to come in and you have yourself together. You have all of your ducks in a row. And it does take some time to get the ducks in a row. I do understand that. But you want to make sure that you have at least a direction and that you're able to say what you're wanting to do within 10 seconds. You may not have everything on paper. You may not have your organizational chart, just every I dotted, every T crossed, but you want to make sure that you at least know what your direction is, and you want to begin with the end in mind. And that's where you can get people to share with you. And we're already down to the last slide, which is our letters of support and memorandum of understanding. I'm going to move my picture a little bit so that you can, we're going a little bit too far. Let's see if I can grab this picture and move it up so that you can see all of this. You want to establish your partnerships and collaboratives with letters of support. Now, what is a letter of support? I'll just show you. A letter of support is a pat on the back, and that pat on the back just says, we support you. We're not giving you anything. We're not going to exchange anything with you, but we do support what you're doing. We think it's great. That is a letter of support. They may give you a memorandum of understanding. Now, that's the gravy. The memorandum of understanding says, we're going to exchange something. We're going to exchange something. Either we're going to allow you to use our vans, we're going to allow you to use our facility, we're going to allow you to use our copiers, we're going to allow you to use our libraries, we're going to allow you to use our space, we're going to allow you to use something. So that's what the memorandum of understanding is. Know the difference between a letter of support and a memorandum of understanding. A letter of support says we're going to give you a pat on the back. A memorandum of understanding says we're going to exchange something. So those are some of the things that you need to have together when you are trying to build your collaborative team. Make sure that your collaborative team know that when they're getting a chance to go out and they're getting a chance to go to the workshops and to the expos and shows, to bring back information to the group. And remember that when you're buying supplies, a lot of times those suppliers know about grants. It's to their benefit to seek out grants that could pay for their product. And they already know who some of those grants are that's able to pay for their product. So as you're traveling, especially for schools that are going to the expos and shows, as you're traveling, make sure that you're bringing back information to your person who is trying to put grants together for you, because it's kind of hard for the grant writer to write the grants, research the grants, do all the information that has to go in doing the grants, and then the people all around them is traveling all over the country but don't bring back any information. It's your responsibility to go to those expos and shows and conferences and bring back information to the grant writer so you don't work the grant writer to death. Go to those conferences and bring it back. Grant team, when you're out there, bring back the different grants that are being talked about. Bring back some of the causes that are being talked about. If you're picking up great information, send that information to your grant writer, because a lot of times that grant writer can use that information, especially if you're asking them to help you write grants. They can use that information and help them to put together a great RFP, which is request for a proposal for you. Well, that's going to be about all for now. I appreciate you guys joining in every Thursday about 7:30. So until next time, if the Lord should delay his coming, we'll see you again on next Thursday at 7:30. All righty, have a great day.